We are here in the transaction model, and we're gonna paste this new transaction model class. It is important that this one has always an ID, and ID has to be lowercase and has to be in a string. If not, you're gonna get an error when saving the transaction model into the NoSQL database. Another important one is the account ID. This one is the one that we're gonna be doing the filters when querying the database. So the most important things here are the ID and the account ID. So the next step is going to the actual function, and one thing that we need to see is the documentation. So what's happening here? So before, when creating the CosmosDB, there were two options, or there are several, but the two options that we saw, that were one called NoSQL, and the other one it was MongoDB. And this is important because in the documentation, Azure CosmosDB, for the output binding, that the one that we are looking for, it's only supported by NoSQL. So let's go here down. The Azure CosmosDB output binding lets you write a new document on Azure CosmosDB using the SQL API. We're gonna be using version 4 or more. If we go to the database, we can see the model here. Oh, the version, that doesn't matter. Let's go back again to the documentation. So what's important here is that we're gonna be using the IASync collector. So we are gonna be using also extension 4. In the extension, it's important to differentiate between the function and the extension, because in the extension some properties are named differently. We're gonna be using connection instead of connection string, and we're gonna be using container name instead of collection, and that's it. Another option is about the connection, how we're gonna be connecting into the database. And for version 4 or higher, we can use the Azure Active Directory, but we're gonna be using, for this example, the connection string. We're not be setting up any other Azure service. So this is the most important thing about this one. And the other one that I wanted to show you is this post documentation, or where this is an article explaining how to work with Azure bindings. This is what we want. So this is important. Azure supported APIs. Azure Cosmos DB bindings are the only supported for use with Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL. That means that the database that we set up at the beginning, it's not gonna work to use with bindings. So let's do some changes first. Let's create a new database. Let's go to CosmosDB. CosmosDB. We want to create a new one. And as you can see here, we have CosmosDB for several engines, and the one that we set up before, it was for MongoDB. And the one that we need to do now is the NoSQL in order to be able to set up everything using the bindings. We create this one. We set this one in the in the Microservice for Azure resource group. Any account name, I'm gonna use the one that is CosmosDB for NoSQL. Region East, and we're gonna click here in serverless. And just review and create it. Once you finish, you go to the Azure DB, and I already have it created here. Click on this one, go to add new container, and the new container, if you don't have created the database yet, create a new database here. I already have the DB transaction history created, so I use existing one and I use this database. And for the container name, use transaction. I'm gonna use for convention. I'm just gonna use collection because this one used to name collection. And just click OK, and this is gonna create the database if it doesn't exist, and the container or collection, as you want to call them. Once this is set up, this is everything that we need. Just we need to keep connect to database. We copy this primary connection string, copy this one, and that's it. Let's go back to the Azure function. And in the Azure function, this is the account. The Azure function, first we add this new setting here. We're gonna create this new setting called CosmosDB connection, and we're gonna copy and paste the new connection string. Once it's done, this is how it's gonna look like. And lastly, we go back to the Azure function and we're gonna copy and paste this one. This is how the binding, and this is how we are gonna connect to the database and do the binding. So this is the CosmosDB binding. This is the database name that we created. This is the container name that we just created also, we call it collection. And the connection string that we set up, the CosmosDB connection that is in the local settings here. Next one, we create the document where we want to write the information, and I already have it here. So we just deserialize the message from the service bus. later we write into the document, and that's how easy it is when using CosmosDB output bindings. One thing, we need to change the signature of the function. Azure task. Yes, as in task. And transaction model. And the document is not sync, and that's it. This is how the Cosmos DB output binding is gonna work. And lastly, I forgot to mention the Nugget package that we are using. So we have installed the Microsoft Azure Web Job Extension CosmosDB and version 4.3. In the documentation, actually it points us to that one. So install extensions for the process. Let me check where it was actually. So this is also important to mention. The supported version is the function 4 or more is only for .NET 6 using the in-process or insulated. If you want to do the insulated process, you can use .NET 6 or 7. This is not what I was looking for. Okay, here it is, install extension. So for working for extension 4, we need to go to this Nugget package, and the version that we're going to be using is the 4.3. So this is the one that we installed before. This is the one that we have in the Azure function, the 4.3. And once you have that installed, CosmosDB binding is going to start working, and these parameters also are going to work with that extension. Let's run the Azure function and see if this one is working. Looking fine. We already created the history process. We have a trigger by the Azure Service process when it sends a message to our history subscription channel. We are subscribed and we are waiting for the event to be launched for the history process, and then we're going to trigger binding and send information to the CosmosDB NoSQL. Actually, let me write that. CosmosDB NoSQL. This is important. So let's make a try. Let's comment this part. Let's put a breakpoint here. Now let's go to the CosmosDB for MySQL and let's see the data explorer, transaction collection, and I'm gonna delete the collection. Delete container, test. I'm deleting it to make sure that everything is set up from zero. Let's create a new container. Use existing database. The same name. The ID that we're gonna be using for the primary key, and we save this. Okay, now it's created. And let's send a message to the Azure Service Bus. As soon as I create a transaction, and as soon as I create a transaction, I'm gonna set a message to the Azure Service Bus, and the Azure Service Bus is gonna trigger my Azure function. So this is what I wanna see right now. Let's send a new transaction for the account ID 1, and see the breakpoint is hitting just here. We can see the message we just sent for the transaction. We're gonna deserialize and we're gonna save it into the database. So we can see in the logs that it's finished. Let's go to our database, transaction collection. Let's refresh this. Go to the items, and we can see right here the message that we just sent. Let's create a new one for another amount, just to be completely sure. 451. Send. Hit breakpoint. Let it play. Go to the database. Refresh. You see an 88 now. Refresh here, 88, and we can see the amount 451. Now that we know that it's working, we need also to fix something else. We already had set up the history microservice to go and search into Cosmos DB, but we change from CosmosDB Mongo to NoSQL. This is the name of the product. We need to do some changes also in the history microservice. So I already did some fixes, and let me show you what I did. First, I'm using the config cn history. I changed the endpoint to point to the new CosmosDB for NoSQL connection string. This one actually, let me do it right now. We're gonna add this one. Let me copy and paste it. This one we're gonna be changing into the app config on our Azure. Let's go to the app config. We are already in the app config. Let's go to the variables configuration explorer. We need to change the one that is for history, and let's edit this one. No, this one is not the connection string. Where's the connection string? Connection string, I call it connection string moment. Let's edit this one. Let's create a new one. I'm gonna call config connection string history. Copy the new connection string here. Save it. And let's go back to fix our history. Microservice. Okay. We can make this one. We just need this app external. Go to the programs, yes. Make sure we're using the config as cn app external to make the connection to the app config and extract all the configuration from there. Let's save this. We also, I'm gonna need to add some packages. So we need to add Microsoft Azure for Cosmos. This is the one that we're gonna be using to connect to the CosmosDB via NoSQL API. Once we finish this, we are gonna go to the iMongoDB. I added the task to the filter by, then went to the Mongo repository and I created the container, the Mongo collection, feed iteration, and this one I don't need it yet. We need to comment these lines, delete them if you want. We're gonna use the Cosmos client that is from the Cosmos, Microsoft Azure Cosmos library that we just installed to create the connection to the NoSQL Cosmos. And we're gonna create the container. The container is gonna be using the, as you can see here, the container is the, well, the first part is the name of the database and then the name of the container. Actually, let's create this one also in the app config. We're gonna call config uh, database transaction collection. No, history transaction. Save this and let's go to the history again. We're going to use the configuration to have access to the name that we just added into the app config. And later, I changed what we had in the filter by function, with this snippet, and this is the one that is doing is just going into the database, consulting by the filter expression that we just sent, and return the information. We also don't need this one anymore, and this one we don't need them anymore also. The other class that I changed, it was in the history controller. I just create this. This one it wasn't async. I added the async task. I'm now waiting for the filter by, and that's it. Now let's test this is working. Hope I configure everything correctly. And if this is working, we should see the transactions that we created into the database. Let's go to the report. We created everything with account ID 1. Let's just send this one. We should see 2 transactions with 500 and 451, and this is working good now. So we finish the configuration for the Azure function. We created the binding very easily using the CosmosDB for NoSQL, and we changed some configurations for the history microservice to make sure that we are able to consult the CosmosDB database. Also, we had to change the CosmosDB for Mongo to CosmosDB for NoSQL. Next step, we need to publish the history process into Azure function. We can do this very easily using the publish